It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. There are a lot of people who feel like they need therapy. And for the first time in decades, more people are seeking talk therapy over medication. The good news is there's less stigma preventing people from accessing care. The bad news, a lot of people struggle to access therapy. Some clinicians argue that one of the big issues is private equity. Linda Michaels says that's had devastating consequences for both clients and clinicians. People are much less likely to get the therapy they need, and therapists are in a worse position to offer it. That's the premise of Linda's talk this Sunday at a local fundraiser for a Metro Detroit clinic. Linda is a psychologist in private practice in Chicago and a co-founder of the Psychotherapy Action Network. To discuss how life has changed for both clients and clinicians, we have Linda Michaels with us now. Linda, welcome.
Thanks, Robin. Great to be here.
And I should note, we contacted two big health insurance providers, United Behavioral Health and Cigna. We wanted their perspective, how their administrative systems have complicated work for therapists and made getting therapy harder. We did the same for several private equity groups. None of them responded to our requests for comment. So I see you shaking your head over there. Linda, we're going to get into why. I mean, that means that we're spotlighting the clinician's perspective because we're not getting the perspective from some of these giants. And that's a good thing. I think folks want to hear the human perspective. You've been practicing therapy for some time now. When did you first understand that health insurance networks were making it harder for potential clients to get therapy?
Well, I think I actually understood that a long time ago. As a young girl, my father is a psychiatrist, and I remember him talking about some of these same issues back in the 80s. It's been a long struggle, decades-long struggle, to get adequate insurance coverage for psychotherapy. Initially, when private insurance companies first came about, there was no coverage at all for therapy. It was only for medical, physical items. And so there's been a long history of insurance companies discriminating against mental health care. What we're seeing now is the culmination of all of that. We're seeing a combination of insurance companies underpaying therapists. For example, they underpay therapists relative to medical doctors by about 20 to 30%.
I want to jump in here to just help folks to draw a connection here. So this is why so many therapists, I mean, I know for myself, when I have looked for therapists, I've found folks that seem like, oh, I think I could really align with this person, and they don't accept my insurance. And this is why it is not because a therapist is greedy or trying to make more money. It's because of the fact that when they are working with insurance companies, they are making significantly less. What is it, like 40 to 50% less?
Yes, it can be. It can be exactly that. And it's a double whammy because not only do therapists make a lot less through insurance companies, but the administrative burden is a lot higher. For example, when I first went into practice, I signed up to be an in-network therapist with Blue Cross of Illinois, which I still am to this day. And it probably took around 5 or 6 months for my application to go through. I had to follow up multiple times. I know that on the medical side, like your regular PCP, they can sign up with insurance in about 2 weeks. So, I mean, the differences are drastic. And I think, between being underpaid and overburdened with all of these policies on the admin side, therapists look at this picture and say, I just can't make this work. And that's probably why you didn't hear back from United and Cigna. I don't think they really have a defensible position here.
Could you think about a specific client, obviously without identifying details, where you watched the insurance system fail them in real time? And what happened?
Yeah, I mean, basically what has happened is, for example, I'm thinking of one woman I worked with for a while who's had multiple traumas and losses. And basically the insurance company said, well, we don't really provide coverage for that diagnosis. And so what am I to do? Am I to create a fake diagnosis for her and change the story? Or, and how can they even decide this? They don't know this woman. They've never even met her. They've never examined her. They've never evaluated her. They have policies that are just, blanket across the board that, again, are not really defensible.
Wow. For you as a psychotherapist to hear from an insurance company that says, we are placing certain priorities for certain diagnoses rather than others. Oh, how do you react to that as someone who understands that mental health is so multifaceted, and these are companies that are essentially telling you, well, that diagnosis isn't important enough for us to cover.
Yeah, it's breaks my heart. It's also enraging. It's patently unfair, and it ends up, I think, hurting the most vulnerable and folks also from more marginalized or under-resourced communities who don't have a lot of options to begin with. And all of this was part of the reason for the founding of Psychotherapy Action Network 9 years ago.
Right. You founded that with the purpose of advocating for psychotherapy and psychotherapists. So explain it for us, if you would.
Yeah, the founding of Psychotherapy Action Network was preceded by, again, I'm based in Chicago, so this was an Illinois situation, but it was preceded by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois announcing that they were creating a brand new insurance network that they were going to market to companies. And without explanation, they said all of the reimbursement rates will be 15% less than they are today. And this wasn't just for therapy. This was also for hospitals, for medical doctors, cardiologists, dermatologists, everybody across the board. And so most doctors, hospitals said, I'm not going to sign up. Why would I sign up with this? But it just goes to show the kind of market power that these insurance companies have, where all of a sudden one day they can say, yeah, we're just cutting reimbursement rates by 15%. Good luck. And so, this was, again, on the back of many, many years of struggle to get parity reimbursement for therapy, for mental health care. And so a group of therapists came together. There was a conference in Chicago. It was a multifaceted conference. There was actually a former lobbyist from the insurance industry. There was a state senator. There were therapists. We all came together and talked. And then sort of out of that energy, Psychotherapy Action Network was born to really both advocate for better access to psychotherapy and also support the clinicians who provide that care.
So your experience in raising awareness and in the field of psychotherapy, it is deep, it is far-reaching, it is centered on coalition building as well. And you're looking at things very holistically. You're looking at clinicians and you're looking at the clients and you're looking at insurance companies and all these different barriers to access. I'm wondering how unique this moment feels as we consider the fact that, luckily, very, very fortunately, the stigma about therapy, we are watching it dissolve and dismantle slowly but surely. We're more understanding that our mental health is just as important as our physical health. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like, when you talk about your father, who was a psychotherapist, and the barriers then, decades ago, would you say it's Is it easier now because there is more of this widespread reckoning of the value in therapy? Is it at least easier now for us to access it than it was, say, in the 80s?
Well, it's a great question, Robin, and I'm sorry to say I don't really think so. On the one hand, I think it's easier for people to raise their hand and say, I'm suffering, I have some mental health issues, I need help. To your point, I think stigma has gone down. We've all gone through the pandemic and realized how lonely and depressed and anxious and scared that made us feel. So I think, with celebrities and athletes talking about their mental health journeys, all of that has made it easier, I think, for people to raise their hands and say, I need help. Unfortunately, I think these systemic problems with the insurance industry and now increasingly other industries, financial, private equity, venture capital, big tech, Amazon, Google, all of these other kinds of companies are getting into the mental health field in a big way. And I think making it more and more difficult for people to actually find the kind of help that they want.
So what you're saying is that what has come along with the growing destigmatization of therapy, what's come with that also is the realization that there's a lot of profit to be made in therapy. Mm-hmm. But the people in control of that profit are very powerful players.
Yes, and their business model is to make money. Of course, as a psychotherapist, that is how I earn my living, yes, but my main goal is to help people. And the main goal of these large companies is to make money. And so we see them coming into the field. They're offering apps. I think in 2024, the global market for mental health apps was $7.5 billion. I mean, this is big money we're talking about here.
I have a question for you about those apps because I have a good friend who's a therapist, and she would not sign up to work with one of the apps because she said it's a really, really bad deal for therapists. Mm-hmm. What do you want people like me seeking therapy to understand about using those apps?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a couple different kinds of apps. Yeah. There are some apps that will teach you, it's kind of like reading a self-help book, but instead of a book, it's in the form of an app. So it will teach you some skills, some breathing exercises, some coping techniques. So that is kind of a self-help tool. So those have their place. They can be useful for some people in some instances. Then there are other kinds of apps that will help match you with a therapist. You enter some descriptions about what you're experiencing and what you're looking for.
Those are what I was thinking of. Yeah.
And then they will match you with a therapist. And then you kind of go off and do the therapy with that therapist. The issue that I have with a lot of those matching apps is that, again, the platform that does the matching, they do the billing, they provide the link for the video or the text communications, whatever you're doing with the therapist, they control pretty much, from soup to nuts, and they have their hands on a lot of your data.
So this is a privacy issue as well.
It's a big privacy issue. And basically, at Psychotherapy Action Network, we spoke out against one of these apps. This was actually before the pandemic. This was early on. And we were very concerned that this was basically a texting kind of a company. And you would text the therapist, and a day later, they would text you back. And that wasn't really what people were looking for at all. There was no evidence base to show that texting was actually an effective form of treatment, and they were playing fast and loose with your privacy. And we were very concerned about a number of these things. We wrote some letters to the American Psychological Association, and very quickly we were sued, actually, by this company for defamation and libel, and $40 million in damages, which to a very small nonprofit advocacy grassroots organization and an individual person was an astonishing amount of money. It was terrifying.
What did you do?
Well, a week later, the lawyers that we did have helping us out with a few things on the nonprofit side, they resigned. They said, this is
too much.
This is too much. We don't know how to handle this. And we scoured the country, cold calling lawyers all over the place. And finally, a lawyer in New York with Arnold and Porter, which is a very large law firm, said this is clearly a First Amendment issue. You are entitled to free speech, even if the company doesn't like what you have to say. This is a clear example of a big company trying to bully you into silence, and we want to represent you pro bono.
Wow.
And they did, and we won in court. But it was a very scary situation, but it really taught me how these companies behave, how they react, and the steps and the money they're willing to spend to silence any critics.
Well, and just because you were very fortunate to find pro bono legal representation, we should not shrug off the emotional toll that dealing with that kind of situation, a lawsuit like that, for you as a professional, that's huge. So to be sued by someone for huge amounts of money, that in and of itself really had to be quite the experience.
Yeah, it was really harrowing.
But, we have to look at the other side of things, because private equity firms would argue that they're helping therapists, that they speed up the back end process and they make it easier for therapists to navigate a healthcare insurance system that we know is really onerous. So what's your response to that perspective?
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, they do. Those things that you just said, they do speed up the admin side of things. That is correct. However, what they don't tell you, what they're not transparent about, is a lot of other things. So, for example, right now we're seeing a lot of private equity companies introducing, new companies for therapists to, you sign up with this company, they will do all the billing, and they also say, because we represent so many therapists, we can negotiate a better reimbursement rate for you with the insurance company because we have more negotiating power than you do as an individual. You'll make more money, and you won't have to do all this paperwork stuff. So it sounds like great.
Yeah.
So tens of thousands of therapists have signed up with these companies. What has happened? We did a research study last year. We published the results on our website. And basically what we found is that regarding the claim that you'll make more money, that's a 50-50 proposition. Half the therapists said, yes, I'm making more money. Half said, actually, no, I'm making the same. A third are even making less money. So there's that. Then also what they don't tell you is who actually owns these companies. It's not really clear to the therapists when they sign up. It's not even really clear to the therapists after they're part of the company. Why is that? Well, because probably if they were upfront about this, most therapists would not sign up. In fact, in our research, we asked therapists, if you knew that these companies were owned or had major investment from insurance companies, would you work with them? 85% said no. Well, all of these companies have major ownership stakes or investment stakes from all of the big insurance companies, United, Cigna, Blue Cross, etc. So these insurance companies are intimately involved with the private equity companies and with big tech, with Google, with Amazon. All of these industries are coming together. They want to get their hands on data.
So we're talking about the privatization, the corporatization of mental health care in America, and what it means to support your local therapist. I'm inserting therapist in lieu of business. We talk a lot about supporting local businesses, but you're making a strong case for what it means to support your local therapist, to go to your local therapist. I want to get into, Linda, why you switched your trajectory and went down this path of therapy. We're going to do that after the break because I realize this has not always been your path. It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent, and my guest is Linda Michaels. She's a psychologist in private practice in Chicago, and she's co-founder of the Psychotherapy Action Network. She'll be speaking at a local fundraiser this Sunday about how private equity has made it harder for therapists to operate and how it's made it more difficult for us as patients to access care. We'll be right back. It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest today is Linda Michaels. She's a psychologist in private practice in Chicago and a co-founder of the Psychotherapy Action Network. She'll be speaking at a local fundraiser this Sunday about how private equity has made it harder for therapists to operate and more difficult for patients to access care. And we're having this conversation amid some good news, and that is that more people are accessing mental health care, and they're choosing mental health care actually over medications. But at the same time, that access to actually finding a therapist, keeping that therapist, is getting harder. So we're talking about why that is. You didn't start out in the profession of therapy. You worked in business for a long time before going back to school, Linda. Why did you get into the work of therapy?
Well, and I think maybe I'll start off backing up a little bit before that of why I got into the field of business. Because as I had mentioned before, my father is a psychiatrist, and I always thought, I'm going to follow in his footsteps. And then I went to college and was exposed to a lot of other fields and other interests of mine developed. And I graduated, I was kind of confused. I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
It's hard to be a kid of a psychiatrist, no?
It can be, yes. Yes.
You're constantly being analyzed.
Right, or worried about it. Yes, exactly. And so I didn't really know what path I wanted to take. And I ended up going into business and working at a local company here actually in Michigan. And I enjoyed that. And there were aspects of that I liked working with other people. I liked working in teams. And so I ended up going into business school, and I went to an international business program because I also had a strong interest in Spanish literature, Spanish culture, Hispanic culture. And so I really wanted to work in Latin America. And so I did do that after business school, and I worked in many different countries in Latin America, and then realized I was lonely being so far away from friends and family. I wasn't really satisfied with the work in the business field, and I was depressed. And so I went into my own personal therapy, and that was quite extensive, and I explored a lot of issues and really understood myself in a lot more depth than I ever had before. And coming out of that, I realized I mainly want to help people. I do want to go into the field of psychology. And so at the age of 39, I enrolled in graduate school for psychology. And also, not surprisingly, this happens to many people who go into therapy and really unearth a lot of issues and understand themselves and get to the root of their issues. I also found my life partner at the same time. So life changes in multiple dimensions of my life simultaneously as a result of my own personal therapy.
So the springboard to this transformation for you was going to therapy.
Yes. Yes, it was.
I wonder what struck you while you were a patient in terms of some of the interactions that you had with your therapist, the space for listening, for revelations. For those of us who've been in therapy, that can be such a powerful thing. And I wonder what that was like for you, having perhaps one of those first revelations, feeling that space for thought and for contemplation and for listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was incredibly powerful. I'm very grateful to my therapist. I, like many people, had parts of myself that I didn't fully understand, parts of myself that I felt ashamed about, that I was worried about, that I felt I needed to hide, that no one would understand either. And she helped me realize that these were actually normal human parts of myself that actually nothing to be ashamed about. Many people, there's a great diversity, in all of us, and we have to accept and understand that. And that's kind of, that was a big part of my journey, instead of running away from things, to really accept them about myself and to understand that's what makes me unique. That's what makes me me.
You're making a strong case for therapy. We've also talked about, Linda, some of the barriers to accessing therapy. So I want to move now to some of the potential solutions for people who are listening right now who are saying, yeah, this is something that I want to be able to step into that space, but I feel like there have been a lot of barriers for me to do that. I mean, what we've learned here is that our mental health insurance system is broken.
Mm-hmm.
Health insurance companies would say they need to make a profit. How do we reform the health insurance system to make things for them and for therapists and for clients?
Mm-hmm. It's a big task, a tall order for sure. There have been a number of federal laws along the way to try to reform the health insurance industry. We're moving in the right direction with that lately, but unfortunately, the Trump administration just recently decided, yeah, we're going to stop working on that. We're actually not going to go there. So that's a big blow.
Are you surprised by that? Because mental health seemed to be a nonpartisan issue that was really uniting politicians across the aisle.
Right. Mental health is, but the insurance industry is not.
Uh-huh.
Yes, they spend billions in lobbying every year, and they're getting what they paid for in Washington. I will say one bright spot is actually in the state of Illinois, where I live now. There was a law passed this in 2025 that will open up access to psychotherapy for 2.5 million people living in Illinois. How is it going to do that?
Yeah.
It's basically some of the things that we've talked about. It's going to raise the reimbursement rates for therapists so that they're more on par with how other doctors are paid. It is going to reduce the administrative burden so that it will basically make it much more attractive and much more feasible for therapists to work with insurance companies in network. And that way, then, people who need therapy can use their insurance to help pay for it.
Is this the future? Is it going to be that the onus is more on states? And if so, what does that mean for equity? Because we can already point to a lot of examples of, depending on what state you live in, you have a certain quality of life. You have a certain access to healthcare, to reproductive rights, for example. So this sounds really promising for a state to take the reins on this. But is it concerning to you as well because of what it could mean for people's access to healthcare if it's not handled at the federal level?
Absolutely. I mean, there are federal laws on the books that are supposed to be promoting parity, equal coverage, equal insurance coverage for mental health care. The problem is the laws are not enforced. So they're kind of laws in name only. They're not really all that meaningful. The penalties are very low. The insurance companies get caught. They pay a small fine. It's a slap on the wrist. So there are laws on the books at the federal level, but they're just not all that meaningful of a deterrent. So the states are stepping up. Illinois, and also, talking about private equity, both Pennsylvania and Oregon have passed laws saying no private equity in healthcare.
Wow.
Period. So states are recognizing this problem, but you're right, state by state, it's a very different reality for people based on their zip codes, and that's not fair.
I wonder if we could zoom out from the states and from the U.S. and look at mental health care and how it's operating in countries with different healthcare systems, say single payer systems, for example. Can you think of any models that are really working?
Well, it's tough, Robin, because in some sense, single payer may bring a lot of benefits and equity to the situation. But if we look at countries like the UK, Switzerland, Scotland, Britain, it's not turned out all that well. There has been an intense focus on measuring and counting and quantifying the number of appointments people have, the wait times, all these kinds of metrics that can be easily quantified. And that's been at the expense of actually providing quality care. So in the UK, for example, the system has degraded to the point where if somebody attends 2 therapy sessions, that's it, just 2, they count that as a successfully completed treatment.
I mean, we haven't even gotten started. I come to see you at your office, and on that second session, I mean, we're still just talking about pretty surface stuff, no?
We're just getting to know each other. We're building trust. We're understanding what you want to work on, what your goals are. Do
I like the cut of your jib?
Exactly.
So that's not at all adequate, is what you're saying.
And so it's produced a lot of statistics, but not a lot of meaningful care.
What's the one thing you want listeners to take away with them right now through this very, we've taken this conversation in a lot of different places when it comes to mental health care and access. And I think it's great that we've been able to get the perspective of a therapist who is in private practice. But what is the thing you want people to take away?
I want people to understand that they're not alone, that they are in the same boat as many other people. If they're suffering, that there is help available. A couple of things to mention. We've done several very large research studies with the U.S. population, over 3,000 people, and we asked people, what do you most want from therapy? And people said, I really want therapy to help me get to the root of myself and my issues. And there are therapists out there who want to help you do exactly that. Now, as we've talked about, there are many barriers and problems in finding those therapists and affording that care, but it is out there. And there also are many resources out there where care is offered at a reduced, low-cost basis. And at Psychotherapy Action Network, actually next month in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, we are launching a new campaign with a directory of low-cost clinics from around the country, so you can search by zip code, et cetera. And the Mel Bornstein Clinic is listed in this database as well locally, for example. And so I hope that will become a resource people can turn to if we can get people aware of it and break through the noise and the clutter and share that with people. There are options out there.
Linda Michaels is a psychologist in private practice in Chicago and a co-founder of the Psychotherapy Action Network. Linda, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Robin.
There's a fundraiser for the Mel Bornstein Clinic, which Linda mentioned. She'll be speaking at that event. It's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. this Sunday at Cork and Gable on Michigan Avenue in Detroit's Corktown. It is a paid event. Coming up on the Metro, Detroit is interesting because there are 2 cities nestled within its limits. One of them gets very little attention. We'll hear about what makes Highland Park special next. Stay with us.